On a blustery 𝗶𝗶𝗴𝗶 afternoon, we're heading to sea with marine conservationist 𝗀𝗏𝗏. For the past 30 years, he's enthralled visitors to Algoa Bay with sightings of whales, bottlenose dolphins, seabirds, and of course African penguins at the famous colony on 𝗀𝗁𝗏 Island. But we're on the lookout for something else. It's called bunkering.
Lloyd, how do you really feel about the bunkering operations?
Well, Derek, this is the most serious threat that's faced Algoa Bay in the 30 years that I've been doing it.
Bunkering is ship-to-ship refueling that occurs at sea rather than in port, and it's raised alarm bells for those concerned about its impact on nature.
Port Elizabeth Port Control.
As we head out, 10 vessels are already visible on the horizon. It doesn't take long to spot the first refueling ship.
This is really the petrol attendant, a bunker barge that gets fuel from the mothership and then heads off to fuel the customers, which are passing cargo ships.
The mothership is carrying 90 million litres of fuel. Lloyd estimates that's the equivalent of just under 1,000 petrol stations. And it's sitting right on top of a marine protected area. Over 100 vessels are refueled this way each month.
If you go back 5 years or so, were the alarm bells ringing when you heard about this bunkering?
Yeah, definitely. The alarm bells were ringing, but of course we were assured that, don't worry, this won't affect the penguins. We've got almost 100% safety record in the Mediterranean. This is not the Mediterranean. This is Algoa Bay. This is big westerly winds. This is big storms. You know, you can't compare the two.
Ship-to-ship bunkering started in 2016 when our government spotted a gap in the market. The thousands of ships passing our coastline were getting caught in bottlenecks as they approached port to refuel. It's fallen to the Marine Safety Authority, SAMHSA, a government agency, to ensure the refueling at sea is done safely. Captain Vernon Keller says weather is just one of the many factors considered.
Bunkering is not a wild, wild west story out there. You know, there's set international processes and procedures that need to be followed globally. These vessels are managed via what we call a safety management system, right? Those are set procedures when you connect and you disconnect.
That's cold comfort to some conservationists who insist the practice is damaging nature.
When bunkering started, there were around 23,000 penguins on 𝗀𝗁𝗏 Island here, about 4 kilometers offshore. Today we've spotted about half a dozen. It really is tragic and makes you wonder what we're doing to our marine environment.
The reasons for the demise of 𝗀𝗁𝗏's penguins are complex, and few know that better than Professor 𝗀𝗏𝗶𝗴𝗶, who spent the past 15 years trying to get to the bottom of it.
Recently, they've been decreasing over the past 7 years by 90%.
By 90%?
90%, yeah.
It's a figure made more shocking by research that shows penguins don't migrate. So despite the threat posed by 2 nearby harbours and signs of diminishing fish stocks, they won't leave the colony on 𝗀𝗁𝗏.
For the past 2 years, we were wondering how come penguins could decrease that fast.
Their attention turned to another, less obvious type of pollution.
So the latest research I had was we showed the noise levels we calculated from the maritime traffic of 8 years, so before bunkering and after bunkering. And Algoa Bay, one of the noisiest bay in the world.
An astonishing finding, considering it's nowhere near the biggest. Attaching hydrophones, her team measured the penguins' communication patterns.
Penguins are talking on the surface, so they work together underwater to create bait ball, to forage, but they need to coordinate themselves, just like dolphins. Noise pollution underwater in the oceans is something we started to realize internationally for only 12 or 15 years. So it's not only whales are obvious and dolphins, but a lot of fish are using that to find a mate, to find food, to avoid predators. So we're messing with that environment and now affecting their life history in ways we don't understand.
And speaking of messing, while it may not explain the loss of penguins, bunkering presents another threat to the environment.
There have been numerous spills since bunkering began here around 6 years ago. And considering the number of ships being refueled, it's bound to happen again.
In the last oil spill, the pipe burst, and it's pumping 150,000 litres a minute. Chemist Renelle Friend has been campaigning to raise public awareness of its dangers.
This is classed as an environmental toxin. It has a long duration that it can have toxicity. And in one of the operators' safety data sheets, they actually state that it bioaccumulates in the marine environment.
And the oil's high sulfur content means penguins are confused into thinking it's nourishment.
What is happening when there's oil with high sulfur? It assimilates food for them. The penguins come swimming around, diving into the oil because they think there is food.
And oil and feathers are a deadly mix. In the first spill, hundreds of oiled birds were removed from the islands, and many more, no doubt, died at sea. 𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶 is from Sankaree, the Foundation for Conservation of Coastal Birds. Oil spills are their worst nightmare.
What would happen if you just left that penguin oiled up on its nest?
It would probably starve to death. So once the bird's oiled, it struggles to swim because it gets cold, and so it'll either die out at sea or it will die on land just because it's too cold to regulate its body temperature.
And when they return to their nests, the oil suffocates their eggs and chicks, so they too are removed. Rehabilitating an oiled bird is an extremely delicate process.
With very potent oils like diesel, for example, we wash the bird immediately because diesel is extremely toxic to the bird and it burns the bird. So we'll wash the bird. Washing is an extremely intense process for the birds and it's very hard on them and their hearts. If we aren't keeping a close eye on them with their waterproofing, they can also die of hypothermia.
After the spill in 2019, Sankaree successfully argued for a moratorium on the issuing of new bunkering licenses until a full risk assessment was done. It is yet to happen. Keller says in his 30 years at sea, he never had an accident while refueling a ship. He thinks the environmental risks are exaggerated.
If you look at it, over 6 billion litres of oil has been transferred and you've had less than 3,000 litres spilled in a 6-year period. That's a risk rating of 0.0005%.
Keller says globally safety standards for ship-to-ship transfers have improved, and SAMHSA ensures they're enforced, issuing heavy fines for any negligence. But high-level suspensions on charges of misconduct and alleged bunkering contract irregularities have cast a shadow over SAMHSA's credibility. Nonetheless, 6 months ago, the agency announced it was accepting new licensing applications.
But surely the safety of the environment comes first.
The
So
safety-
why can't we do this risk assessment?
The risk assessment was supposed to be done by the port authorities. And basically the reason it was a decision to lift the moratorium, and also TMPA, the port authority, could not yet tell us at what timeline they will complete the actual risk assessment. And we had a lot of South African companies also lining up to be able to enter this market.
But after a public outcry, the moratorium on new licenses remained in place. With 2 more oil spills in the last few months, conservation groups are now asking for bunkering to only happen in the harbours. To date, they've had no response.
Not all of that heavy furnace oil floats. So these guys are all trying to clean up the floating stuff. Most of it actually sinks, some of it disperses into the water and other evaporates. And of course the government are now crowing, oh, no birds got oiled. The reason that no penguins got oiled is because there's almost none left.
We wrote to the Minister of Environment, 𝗶𝗶𝗴𝗶, asking what she was doing to protect the endangered African penguin and the marine protected area against the impacts of bunkering. We received no reply, but as bunkering is not a listed activity under the National Environmental Marine Act, it doesn't require a full environmental impact assessment. She has previously said her department is working closely with SAMHSA and the port authorities to ensure the highest safety standards. But is it too little too late to help ease the pressure on the penguins?
What I would really like to see is Sankaree being closed to fishing. There was never any effective closure for fishing. To this day, I mean, the minister promised to have a closure this year. We were promised some decision for the past 4 or 5 years, nothing has happened.
It just makes me so flippin' sad to see who's going to pay for this demise? Who's accountable for this?